Why is story your North Star?
It's very interesting. From a very young age, as long as I can remember, I have used imagination to see the world, and I think a lot of people do. I grew up outside of Buffalo, New York, in the rural parts, in corn country and dairy fields, and I was an only child. So I just had all these forests around me, and there was a creek bed, and I would spend my days, because my friends weren't super close to me all the time. I would see them at school, but for the most part, I was by myself. And so I'd run out into the woods just like this wild, feral child, and I would create up stories in my head to entertain myself because I didn't have other people necessarily around besides my mom and dad. So I think that was really the kernel of it. And my mother is a writer as well. She's also a registered nurse. There were always books in the house, VHS back in the good old days. And so we always had movie nights. We would go to the drive-in a lot as a family. And story was just a part of my life up from the time I was a little kid. I was always in school musicals, reading about the different theater companies all around, and it percolated, and I just loved it. I knew even as a young kid, like, oh, I want to get into this.
What elements make up a great story?
I think that when you touch on basic human conditions, and I can't define them because they're different for every person, but a good story for me is when it touches on things like love and hate and jealousy and compassion and the spectrum of what humans feel. And there's a myriad of ways that one can tell story and have different aspects of that. And for me, I have always been driven to stories not regarding the genre of it, but if it can make me laugh, if it can make me cry, if it can make me scared, if it can make me enticed and move forward and lean in, to me that's a good story. It's asking the questions of why now? What is the arc of these characters, and why do they need to go through this journey? If you can answer those in a satisfying way for the audience, to me that's good art.
Do you remember stories growing up, Watership Down or Judy Blume or Ramona Cleary, anything like that, books, film that really touched you?
That's always a hard question. There's so much good literature and films and plays out there. I think it was a musical, actually, was my first experience that really made me feel real emotion. And it was in Toronto. My parents had ordered tickets to Phantom of the Opera. My mom got me this black velvet dress, and my dad got me a little fake diamond bracelet, and they got us really good seats in it, and I think I was 8 years old. And we were sitting there, and spoiler alert, when the chandelier falls from the ceiling, he had bought the tickets like exactly where the chandelier was going to fall and then have that crescendo across the stage. And I had no idea, but I was so enamored by the story itself. And then to look up, and I saw that chandelier rattling, and it was just fear. And it was that moment, like I said, of leaning forward. And I was like, wow, this can make me feel something that as an 8-year-old, I don't really get the chance. No offense with the Music Man, but or Oklahoma, but they didn't really make me feel those things. And I think that was really the first time, was the theater that made me feel that. And there were Judy Blume, she wasn't a favorite of mine. I just watched the film Dear God, It's Me, Margaret, Can You Hear Me? And that was a good one. It's not my normal genre, but I thought it was really wonderfully done. So I know she's a great artist. But like I said, we had books all over the place, so I was reading like Jane Austen as a young kid, and just bigger books that probably weren't necessarily appropriate for my age, but both my parents wanted me to just have the scale of what could be possible.
What drives you to tell stories and see them performed?
I never came from a place of being hubristic. Hubristic, is that a word? If it is, I just made it up. As a writer, you can do that.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
I never felt like I needed to be a big star. It didn't come from a place of needing people to look at me or be famous or anything. It never ever felt that way, even to this day. To me, I wanted to see story and create stories that could be performed or witnessed or read by others as a form of connecting with other people. And maybe that's because I didn't have a lot of connections growing up, and it was my way to tell stories and to just to have people feel something. And a lot of times when I tried to have conversations with kids my age, it was challenging because they didn't get it. And I had I spoke with a lot of people that were much older than me. We just felt more on the same level. So, yeah.
Yeah, I also am an only child, and I know I've had all sorts of crazy, wild stories. And one thing about being an only child, I mean, I can only speak for myself, is that you can just entertain yourself for hours, and it's not like you need other interaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, sometimes we prefer being by ourselves, at least I do.
Sometimes, yeah.
We have to force ourselves, yeah, to get out there. Like, oh, I have to see people today? Okay, How much did your mom influence you in being a storyteller?
My mom is a great influence of mine. Because she's a writer, she always wanted to be a writer, and she would write things for the Buffalo News, which was our local city newspaper, and other smaller newspapers in the area. She was continually working on different prose pieces in the form of short stories and novels. And that really influenced me because I saw her doing it. I saw her get published. I saw how happy she was, that, excited she was to put so much energy and heart and personal feelings into something, and then to get letters back from people in the community. Thank you for writing this. I feel the same way that you do. And I really felt proud of her. And she was always reading. She let me read pretty much anything I wanted in the house, except I think Helter Skelter was the one book I couldn't read. It was just too violent. She wanted to keep me away from excessively violent topics for a long time, which I understand and respect. So my mom always championed me. She's like, you can do whatever you want. And even now that I'm 39 years old, it's been a while, it's probably been a good 30 years, we had a little bit of a brambly relationship growing up. I was daddy's girl, and she and I are both very creative and a little stubborn at times, and when we know something's right, it's right. And at 10 years old, we were getting in a fight about something, I don't know. I was like not cleaning my room right or something, and then I think my grades had been dropping down to B's, and she was just having a talk with me about it. And she's like, you understand that you have to go to school, and you have to do this to go, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you don't have to worry about me. I know what I'm doing, and I know where I'm going. And I just looked at her dead center as this, 10-year-old, and my mom and I still talk about it to this day because, I was naive and being a little brat at the time, but I still carry that fervor with me. And I think a lot of that is because of her and having my mom in my life like that championed me.
That's a great story. Do you remember where she would write? Did she have a typing table or kitchen table? Where would she write?
She had a little office. Our house is very old. I think it was built in like the 1830s. So all the rooms in the house are really small. And so her office was small, and my dad was a carpenter and a welder and a plumber and he did a whole bunch of jobs, a truck driver. And so the two of them actually had won one of those sweepstakes where they come to your house. I forget what it's called. Where they come to your house with like balloons and a big check that says, you've won $50,000. And this is back in the late 70s, early 80s. Clearinghouse,
yeah,
I think.
Publishers Clearinghouse. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So she won.
Oh my goodness.
And so
Wow.
they got to buy this little farmhouse, and it was very run down, but because my dad had all this skill set, he built her this little nook that had a long desk, all these shelves with books all lining the table. And so when it came time for her to write, when I wasn't driving her nuts, she would go into that room and she'd just shut the door, make sure I was fine, and that's where she would do it. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But she always kept a notebook on her, I remember also. She was a caterer / registered nurse, and no matter what we were doing, there was always a notebook. And she was coming up with these ideas all the time, and anytime she had a flash, she'd pull over the car and be like, write something down, or at the kitchen table during dinner. And she loved mystery novels, and she always wanted to write a mystery novel. And I think this was before I was born, but she had written some sort of scene where somebody in the, like Agatha Christie style, someone had been murdered. And she had written down on a napkin this murder. And my father found it, and he thought that the way she had written it was about him. And so she looked at my mom one day, and he's like, do we need to have a talk? And she's like, no, this is for the novel that I'm working on. But it was constant all over the place.